This is AEDT 1170U, Psychological Foundations and Digital Technology. Module 2, Video Clip 2.1, The Psychology of Adult Learners. In this video, we will begin by looking at the social context of adult learning and the environments and ways that technology has contributed to adult learning. During the tutorial segments, you will have a chance to share your own experiences with learning as an adult, to identify what works for you, what does not work for you, and share some examples of your experiences with your peers. Here are the guiding questions for this video. How has technology shaped or affected the environments where adults learn? What is the social or psychological framework within which adults today learn? What is andragogy, and how did Knoll's ideas shape adult learning? How is this different than the psychology of how children learn? And are grades an important aspect of adult learning? The mere fact that you're watching your course via video segment is good evidence to show that learning environments for adults have dramatically changed. Although you may feel isolated while watching, sharing your thoughts and reflections with only your screen and not with other humans, you are actually more connected now than at any other time in human history. Technology has inundated us with opportunities to learn, so much so that we, as consumers and creators of our learning, must develop filters. These filters could be described as our ability to think critically, to decide what information is important, what problems we wish to solve, what issues we're curious about, and how to find the information we need. No longer is knowing or memorizing a concise set of facts enough. We have to know how to use those facts and which of them is actually important. You might think of this as our ability to sort information from misinformation. Let's take a look at this quote from Robert Pirsig. That problem may not be as big as you think it is, and that fact may not be as small as you think it is. It may not be the fact you want, but at least you should be very sure of that before you send the fact away. Often, before you send it away, you will discover it has friends who are right next to it and are watching to see what your response is. Among the friends may be the exact fact you are looking for. As a result of this information overload, there's an increased demand for and greater diversity of adult learning opportunities. Some of these activities are learner-initiated, such as post-secondary education or professional improvement, while others are society-initiated, such as welfare programs or education in prison environments. Can you brainstorm a list of as many diverse adult learning opportunities that you can create? And note how the psychological settings are the same or different. For example, community college versus university, online courses, or how-to clips from YouTube. The demographics of adult learning. We need to acknowledge that our social and psychological reality is changing. To begin with, there are simply more adults in the world who have access to a great deal more information due to technology. We've seen a shift from a youth-centered culture to an adult-centered culture, not only in education, but in our healthcare priorities. Globalization and adult learning. Changes taking place worldwide also indicate greater social networks and greater access to learning. Technology has increased the pace and accessibility of learning. Mobile learning, anytime, anywhere, is one of the advantages of taking this BA EDT program. But this inundation of information in a world that operates 24/7 requires us to be very specific about what it is we want to learn and why. It also makes things complicated, adding to our psychological stress levels and forcing us to adapt and cope with a faster pace of life. What about technology in adult learning? Think of all the devices that you have on hand that you can use to learn new information. Your cell phone, Twitter accounts, blogs, wikis, or YouTube. The move to open source learning, where information is accessible to all, has created a major shift in how we as adults learn. So, the psychology of adult learning has shifted too. Or has it? In a 2009 report to the APA, the American Psychological Association, entitled How Technology Changes Everything and Nothing, the authors refer to the idea that human beings have always been susceptible to the influences of technology. Since the earliest days of evolution, we have responded and adapted to whatever technology we had available, the wheel and other tools, for example. Yet our adaptability as humans has been a fundamental psychological characteristic of us as species. Although communications technology has had the most profound influence on human interaction and education, we have still retained our basic human instincts. Here are a few points to ponder. Technology has become a fundamental force in shaping the identity, cognitive, and affective process and social activities of our students. Whereas the family was once by far the most important environment for shaping attitudes and beliefs, today children are exposed to many more role models, values, ways of thinking, and attitudes than ever before. Through technology, people can create new reference groups, rather than being socialized primarily through more conventional means. The Internet supports the forming of alternative communities around shared ideas, rather than only through physical contact. The future is no longer tomorrow, but within the next 10 minutes. And finally, there is ample evidence to show that technology is changing the ways that people interact and learn. Think to yourself for a moment. With all of these changes in demographics, globalization, and technological advances, has the psychological learning and living environment for adults become better or worse? What are the psychological advantages and disadvantages for adults facing 21st century digital environments? It is also important to consider that access to these opportunities is not equally available. Amstutz argues for more inclusive adult education practices. She connects the idea that although we're tempted to view technology as shifting human experience forward, it has not done so equitably. Most knowledge has been centered on white, male, and Western European values, or whatever the dominant group might be in a particular culture. And many theories of adult learning exclude important critical and cultural theorists, so one might say that gender, race, poverty, politics, or geography can deeply shape the way we approach our learning. Remember constructivism? We each bring a history with us, a biography, both psychological and sociological, that colors and shapes how we learn, what we choose to learn, and who we learn from best. One of the theories that has shaped adult learning is andragogy. Malcolm Knowles introduced this term in 1968 to differentiate between how adults learn and how children learn, or pedagogy. Andragogy focuses on the adult learner and how his or her life situation impacts on their learning experience. Here are some general principles of andragogy. As a person matures, his or her self-concept moves from being dependent to being a self-directing human being. Adults accumulate a growing reservoir of experience, which is a rich reservoir for learning. Our readiness to learn is closely related to the developmental tasks of our social role, and our time perspective changes as we mature from the future application of knowledge to immediate application. Adults tend to be more problem-centered than subject-centered. The most potent motivations for adults tend to be internal rather than external, and adults generally need to know why they need to learn something. Identify and list some ways that you have used or observed these principles in action for adult learners, such as professional development, job-related training, or any other examples you can provide. Critics of andragogy include these ideas. Andragogy assumes that learning is value-neutral and apolitical. It assumes that all adult learners look alike, that other ways of learning are ignored, and the relationship between the self, or the learner, and society is ignored. And andragogy reproduces some of society's inequities and supports the status quo. So Knowles began to change his thinking from pedagogy versus andragogy to an article on pedagogy to andragogy. He indicated there was a continuum ranging from teacher-directed to student-directed, and that both approaches are appropriate with adults and children depending on the situation. What about grades? Are they important to adults? We'll be addressing this later in the course. However, I want you to consider generally whether or not you believe grades are an important part of the psychology of adult learning. Are adults internally motivated to learn? And are you really internally motivated? Most workplace learning actually has an external reward. or government socially mandated learning where participation is required, such as driving school or job preparation programs, have external rewards. And some adults may not need to know the why of learning. They just learn for the joy of learning. Check out this YouTube clip from Sir Ken Robinson on creativity in schools. He and Robert Pirsig question the role of school in diminishing our creativity by depending on marks and grades. Pirsig stated in his book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, this following quote on the role of grades in learning. As a result of his experiments, he concluded that imitation was a real evil that had to be broken before real rhetoric teaching could begin. This imitation seemed to be an external compulsion. Little children didn't have it. It seemed to come later on, possibly as a result of school itself. That sounded right, and the more he thought about it, the more right it sounded. Schools teach you to imitate. If you don't imitate what the teacher wants, you get a bad grade. Here in college, it was more sophisticated, of course. You were supposed to imitate the teacher in such a way as to convince the teacher you were not imitating, but taking the essence of the instruction and going ahead with it on your own. That got you A's. Originality, on the other hand, could get you anything from A to F. The whole grading system cautioned against it. Here are some synthesis questions for this video. What have been the major lessons that you were able to connect to your personal experience from this video clip? What factors are involved that create the lens through which you are constructing your own adult learning environment? For example, your reasons for taking this program or your cultural or educational background. Can you identify examples from your life experience about how gender, race, politics, or socioeconomic status have shaped the accessibility of online learning for adults? And finally, do you believe grading is an important feature of adult learning? I look forward to chatting with you in tutorial.